The first thing Isabella felt was agony so fierce it snatched the breath right out of her chest. Her wrists were scraped bloody, her arms yanked high over her head, her face mashed against the jagged planks of the wrecked cart. The sun beat down on her like a merciless lash. Her mouth was parched raw, her belly twisted with that gnawing emptiness that tricks you into thinking your bones are plotting mutiny inside. She'd been hauled for hours over the barren wastes, bound like cargo, flung into the rear of a cart that now sprawled in ruins by a forsaken path between Deadwood and Cheyenne. The fellas who'd planned to auction her off were gone, corpses strewn across the dunes, their forms already eyed by wheeling buzzards. She ought to have sensed freedom, but dread shoved in fiercer. If she hollered, nobody'd catch the echo. If she blacked out, she'd wither in the blaze without a soul murmuring her name. Her sight swam. She struggled to drag herself forward, but her limbs quivered, drained from a whole day starved of grub or a drop to drink. The cord bit sharper. She savored the tang of iron on her tongue, then hooves thudded. A horseman crested the ridge, a lanky silhouette in a grit-streaked duster, his mount plodding with the weary grace of a beast that stared down too many sun-scorched miles. Spotting the smashed cart, he reined up, held his breath for what felt like forever. He didn't stir, just took it all in. The carnage, the battered young woman scrabbling toward a weathered watering tub. His gaze sharpened, not with alarm or revulsion, but something else, steady and unreadable. He swung down and approached her slow, like coaxing a spooked coyote that might dash or drop. His drawl came low, gravelly from the relentless glare. "Easy there, you're gonna be okay. Let me work that cord loose." The instant his fingers grazed the tangle at her wrist, she let out a gasp, not terror, but the blaze of torment that simmered too long. Her voice rattled as she choked out the words, "Take it gentle! I can't bear this no more!" Later, Tom would recall that as the very first spark of trust she handed him, raw and unfiltered. He paused. Yeah? Adjusted his hold, slackening the pull so her flesh wouldn't rip further. Kept his tone even, almost tender. "I gotcha. You're secure now. We'll ease into it." The binding gave way. Her arms slumped down. Her frame shuddered as sensation flooded back, hot as embers. He scooped her up before the dust could claim her, hoisted her light as a whisper, bore her to the tub's brim and dipped her palms into the treacle so she could glimpse her reflection. A survivor against all odds. He skipped the questions, who she was, the nightmare she'd clawed from, just murmured, "You're riding with me. Ain't nobody abandoning you in this nowhere." But he hadn't grasped her abductor's reach yet, hadn't fathomed the buyer who'd shelled out coin would ride hard for vengeance. If you were Tom Harlan, would you still pull her from that hellhole, eyes wide to the storm brewing on your back trail?
Tom eased Isabella onto his saddle, like it'd been routine 1,000 sunsets back. Truth be told, he hadn't borne a soul in ages. Kept one arm looped round her the full stretch, bracing her each time the gelding swayed. She never griped, never prodded with a trail lead, just clung to his collar like it was the lone anchor in her unraveling world. When they rolled up to Harlan Homestead, the dooryard lay hushed. Tom dropped from the stirrup, snagged Isabella as she eased off, and ferried her within. Bess, the homestead's keeper who'd watched Tom's whiskers silver since his youth, drew a sharp inhale at the sight. "Mercy me, Tom! What fresh storm hit you out yonder?" Tom settled Isabella in a rocker by the cook fire. She quaked anew, not fright, just bone-deep weariness. He snatched a mug, pumped it brimming with chill spring water, and tipped it to her mouth. "Sip easy, little at a time. You've gone too parched for hasty gulps." Isabella aimed for gratitude, but it splintered in her throat. Bess dabbed a damp rag to the gashes on her arms and grumbled like elders do when worry gnaws, but they mask it fierce. "She craves victuals, Tom. Craves shut-eye. And she needs eyes on that threshold come dusk, 'cause shadows don't travel solo." Tom knew she nailed it. Those sprawled forms by the cart haunted him, same as Isabella's wince whenever the bindings tugged. Somebody ruthless had wrought this, somebody who'd etched the slight into eternity. When Isabella finally stirred her voice, it floated faint, a hush on the wind. "They were hauling me to Silverton." Said a gent there'd fork over fat silver. She paused, drew air. Claimed nobody had ever sniffed my trail. Tom felt ice coil in his ribs. He'd witnessed rot in the Badlands, but her quiet delivery sliced keener than any bandit's blade. He dropped to a knee beside her, voice level as a horizon. You ain't heading nowhere near Silverton, darlin'. You're sheltered here till morning. For the first beat, Isabella lifted her gaze, eyes weary yet sharpening like dew on sage. Why'd you lift me out, Tom? Why'd you halt? Tom hitched a shoulder, casual as if it were dust in the breeze. 'Cause leaving you to bake would have gnawed worse than any reckoning dog in my heels. Bess kindled a lantern, drew the drapes snug. Tom slipped onto the veranda, eyes raking the voided lane, ears pricked for thunder in the far. The breeze hung too limp, too mute. He reckoned the breed running that racket and figured they clung stubborn as burrs. Within, Isabella perched by the board, eyeing a basin of stew too spent to spoon. And buried deep, Tom mulled a thorn he couldn't shake. If the cur who owned that cart sniffed she still drew breath, how many miles would he scorch to reclaim his prize? Harlan Crow stumbled on the remains afore the sun cracked the rim. 4 of his crew flung across the grit, cart gutted like a gutted steer, and the filly he'd bartered for vanished. He hunkered by the prints, traced the crusted crimson with a pair of digits, and rumbled deep in his gullet. A pony'd lingered here, solitary rider, gutsy enough to slice bonds and snatch off Harlan's goods. That sufficed. By eventide, the blaze squatted thick over Harlan Homestead. Tom had mended the west fence, tallied the herd, scanned the rim rocks, and double-checked the approach for kicks. He knew peril sent sharp as sagebrush smoke, and it wafted now. Isabella pitched in with Bess, scraping spuds, but her fingers jittered from the heat rising in her veins and the slits on her wrists flared red and puffed. Bess shooed her to perch, bound a chill rag round her throat, and grumbled the last warranted 3 full days' ease afore dreaming of the saddle again. She carried the look of one piecing together what haven even meant, but each creak of the gale against the panes made her startle. Tom clocked it. He ducked in, tone soft as twilight. You're holding steady. This place is fortress solid. And Bess, she snaps fiercer than any border raider.
Bess huffed a laugh, flicked a dish rag at his elbow. Pipe down, Tom Harlan. Give the gal room to unfurl. But fate denied him that grace. Not come gloamin'. The hound kicked off the clamor first, sharp, alert yelps. Tom snagged his scattergun from the jam, cracked the panel a sliver, and spied 7 shadows crest in the trace, grit churnin' round their ponies. Harlan Crow rode center, arm slung, stare keen as flint. Tom strode to the railin'. Isabella hovered back of the pane, quiverin' as Bess tugged her near. Harlan checked his mount a dozen paces shy. His rasp scraped like rusted iron on stone. You rustled what's mine, Harlan. Fork her over, and we wrap this neat. Tom propped the barrel on his leg, loose but locked. She ain't your chattel, not some jug of rot gut to ledger. Your boys met their end by another's hand, you savvy that. Harlan leaned in the stirrup, grin cold as a grave. I fronted silver for her. I don't ditch coin in the wastes. Tom held mute, just nudged the stock a hair, enough to make Harlan fidget. Tension coiled like a rattler. Even the curs hushed. One of Harlan's crew twitched for his iron. Tom squeezed first, and the slug tore true into Harlan's flank, tumbling him half from the seat. His pack hauled him off as he soaked his jerkin crimson, spitting oaths at Tom with each wheeze. He spurred hard and bolted, the rest kicking dust to catch. Tom eased the rifle down. His palm trembled faint, just enough to register. He knew the reprisal loomed. Isabella edged to the threshold, gaze vast, cheeks ashen. She breathed one query. What's our play now? Tom eyed the barren stretch toward Deadwood. We hit town at first light, lay it square with the lawman, shut this down 'fore Harlan drags brimstone to our stoop. Before we mosey to the next stretch, let me pose something easy. If you're still tuned in, pour yourself a mug of brew and keep riding along. Drop in the notes what the clock says where you are and from what corner of the map you're hearing this. Craving the tail end of the tale? Hit that follow bell so you don't miss the thunder. 3 dawns on, daybreak snuck up sly. The vault still bruised slate when Tom cinched his bronc and lashed Isabella's bedroll aft the horn. She wore jitters but grit tougher than the eve prior. Bess slipped her a wee pail of Johnny cakes for the hall and clasped her palms soft like a dam sending her kin to lessons. Hug Tom's flank tight, honey. Deadwood can bless her bite. Hinges on the first gaze that lands. Isabella dipped her chin and swung up behind Tom. Her grip snaked his metal, firm yet wired. Tom sensed it. He covered her knuckles brief. You're faring grand. We hit the lawman. Spill it all. Let the badge wrangle Harlan. She murmured a soft aye, though doubt lingered if tin to'd buck a wolf like Harlan Crow. The trace to Deadwood dragged endless, powder dry. They ghosted past barrel cacti, sentinels hulking in the blaze like ancient wardens. An eagle wheeled overhead. It held a queer calm, the sort that fools you into reckoning perils lost your scent. But Tom knew the score. Grudges stretch eternal in these parts. As they neared the town's fringe, clamor of mallets and chatter swelled to greet 'em. Deadwood stirred, wranglers totin' timber. Tom aided Isabella down and steered her direct to the marshal's den. Marshal Hale heard Tom recount the cart, the slain hands, the girl he'd unearthed. Then Isabella chimed in, hushed at the outset, then sure. She laid out the barter, the lashings, the drag across the wilds like pilfered pelts. He scrawled each scrap, quill rasping the ledger. Done, he rocked back and exhaled deep. Harlan's danced the razor's edge years now, but this nails his hide if we collar him swift. Mid-sentence, the portal groaned. A pair of aides burst through, doughy-faced. "Marshal, you gotta witness this!" They spilled out, folks milled thick. Down the drag of Maine, murmurs ripplin', fingers jabbin', and there, knotted to the post, a cayuse Tom knew bone deep. Harlan had outpaced him to the burg and packed reinforcements. Isabella clutched Tom's sleeve, words a ghost. What's his scheme this time? Tom flowed on instinct, planted firm before Isabella, nudged her mild behind the marshal as the throng cleaved. Harlan Crow loomed mid-thoroughfare, flanked by a duo, all paws hovering gunward. The swelter warped the haze, and the burg held collective breath. Marshal Hale advanced measured, unhurried. Harlan Crow, you're nabbed for snatching, beaten, and peddling souls. Harlan barked a chuckle, low and venomous, twisting in the silt. Figure I'll let her sashay free? Reckon a star buckles a force like mine? Tom felt Isabella quiver at his back, so he reached rearward till his tips grazed hers. Just shy of a vow he stood guard. Then he flanked the marshal. She ain't your chattel, never was. Today you square for your sins. Harlan lunged first, paw whipped to his shooter, but the aides outdrew. Twin cracks split the lane, both punching his torso. Harlan sagged to haunches, scarlet unfurling across his chambray as his piece skated the clay. A tick, the burg petrified. Then uproar crashed, some ban for hemp on the spot. Others holler in the drag had bled plenty. Marshal Hale flung up a palm, din ebbed. Fetch the sawbones, we play this square. A brace of aides hooked Harlan's pits and lugged him to the lean rear chamber off the din, smearing a sable streak in the powder. Isabella tracked him, gaze brimmed, not dread but a weight liftin', like iron snappin' loose. An hour passed, the doc emerged, cuffs rouged. He might claw a few ticks more if the hurt don't claim him outright. Ere they shifted him, Harlan wheezed a lone plea, craved words with the lass. Isabella wavered, but Tom vowed he'd loom just shy the jam, palm on his hogleg's grip. Harlan shranked, wedged on a slim pallet, gasps jagged and sparse. He pinned her long, then rasped. You drew a wild card like a square shooter, ain't dealt twice. His stare wandered beyond her, to a haze only heat chased. Chest hitched final, and stilled. Isabella backed to the passage. Tom braced as her pins folded. She wept there into his chambray while Deadwood's pulse thrummed on, unchanged. But hers, transformed entire. In the moons after, Isabella rooted at Harlan Homestead, aiding Bess with stews and stitching denims, mastering the rains on balmy autumn paths. Bit by bit, her chuckles bloomed anew. Decades unspooled, brutal winters, endless toils beneath the high desert blaze. And one morn, as the firmament blushed pale amber, Isabella laid her palm atop Tom's and breathed a plain vow. I'd fancy rootin' hair eternal. They wed by that same self-tub where she'd once pled, "Take it gentle, I can't bear this any more." This round she chuckled through salt and sighed, "Hasten, Tom, I can't abide another heartbeat of this joy." Her yarn, sparked in shadow, closed in a hearth forged of steadfast grit and fresh dawns. Now, let me nudge you. If you'd crested that splintered cart, would you have drawn rein like Tom? Would you have scrapped for a soul too frail to raise her brow? If this yarn tugged your heartstrings a whisker, thumb it up so kin can stumble upon it. Ere you drift, snag that brew and spill in the notes from what speck of earth you're tuned in and what the hour chimes for you this tick.